Well, it's the best time of the week, NFL in a flash here on Sports Radio, WNML.com. With Joel Silverberg, I am Eric Kane, and time to take a look back at Week 11 of the NFL slate. Joel, last night, the game of the season so far, one of the better games in the history of the NFL's regular season, Monday Night Football. The Chiefs fell to the Rams in a historic 54-51 bout. Your takeaways from that contest?
Yay, defense. I mean, seriously, you see shootouts like that, and really, I thought both defenses struggled, obviously, protecting the pass. Secondaries were lit up all night long, but both defenses had big plays that kept their teams in it. Defensive touchdowns for both teams. Special teams was big at times in that game. So I think it was more a matter of you had two great offensive minds working with those two offenses that continued to make a lot of plays. And even though on the scoreboard it's going to look poor on the defense, I mean, the playmaking ability for both defenses definitely showed last night as well. So I don't think it's just a matter of, two poor defenses going head-to-head. We saw, I think, a historically great game last night on Monday Night Football.
First time two teams score over 50 points in the same game in NFL history. The first time a team scores 50 points and loses a game in NFL history. Prior to last night, the teams that scored 50 points in the game were 216-0, their record. When scoring 50 points or more, so that was very interesting. You bring up the defense, and so last night in a game that's 54-51, there were 3 defensive touchdowns, 7 turnovers forced, and 2 interceptions late in the fourth quarter that really sealed it for Los Angeles. So again, you can say, well, a lot of points are scored, not a lot of defense, but the defense really did show up to play at times.
Yeah, they really did. Samson Ebukam was fantastic. You had Aaron Donald, who continued to make plays, and I think that's going to be frustrating where you score 51 points in a game if you're Patrick Mahomes. You throw 3 picks, you're strip sacked twice. It's a tough go of it. And I think you look at that, and the penalties killed Kansas City early. So you put up 51 points in a game and you still lose. Well, how does that happen? Well, a big part of it is the 5 turnovers by your quarterback and then the double-digit penalties that you had in the first half. So I think mistakes hurt Kansas City early, but I think for Los Angeles, you gave up 51 points, and you still had 22 points in fantasy. That's kind of tough to do when you think about it.
Pretty good game, pretty good performance. 13 penalties overall for Kansas City. 8 of those came in the first quarter you were alluding to there. So we move on and we talk. You brought up defense. You brought up Aaron Donald, and last night he had a couple of sacks, a couple of turnovers. Spectacular. When you look across the NFL, some dynamic defensive players, Aaron Donald, J.J. Watt, and Khalil Mack, who's having a fantastic year. If you had to choose one of those players to build your defense around, who would it be?
Man, I think right now it would have to be Aaron Donald because the way that he's able to get penetration on the inside. I mean, he gets holding calls on guards all the time. It's not like being an edge rusher where you're trying to beat somebody around. I mean, he has so much strength, and that's such a big weapon in the rush defense as well. I think and it's tough to pick between those 3 guys, but I think right now when your pass rush gets such a boost when you can get penetration up the middle, and it makes room for your edge rushers to be able to get to the quarterback a lot faster. So I love the idea, and it prevents a quarterback from being able to step up into the bucket. So I like the idea. If I could pick any of those 3 guys, I would take Aaron Donald.
You can't go wrong with any of those 3 guys. I mean, J.J. Watt, when healthy, is just a freak of nature, but he's struggled with injuries in his career, but a fantastic player. Khalil Mack, you know what he can do. He's been, I think, I'll have to look this up, but he's been a Pro Bowler at 2 different positions, at a down 4-3 defensive end and as an outside linebacker. Maybe one of the only ones in NFL history to do that. And then Aaron Donald, who's been the defensive player of the year in the AP last year. So a lot of good players. I would probably have to go with Mack because of his versatility, but again, Donald, you can line him up as a shade, as a zero tech, and a 4-eye. A lot of versatility with those 2 guys. Moving over to the AFC, and let's talk about the Tennessee Titans coming off a huge win over the New England Patriots last week, 34-10. They stubbed their toe in Indy. Marcus Mariota goes down. Dean Pease, actually, and thankfully he's okay. He had to leave the game because of a medical issue, the Titans defensive coordinator. But kind of this Tennessee team, like the Vols, very inconsistent.
Yeah, it's odd. You have a 3-game winning streak early with the big win at home over Philadelphia. You managed to pull out a game that maybe you shouldn't have won against Jacksonville early on, and managed to get a big win over Houston, which at the time seemed, okay, Houston's struggling. Now that's such a huge win for Tennessee. Now you go and get the big wins over New England and Dallas in primetime the week before, and you come out and play really, really poorly. It's the worst game that you've played all season, the most points that you've given up all season, and for Tennessee, you just kind of wonder, how does this team recover from that? And they always seem to find a way to, after the loss to Buffalo, after the close loss to Los Angeles, the shutout loss to Baltimore, you continue to ask yourself, how's this team going to come back from it? Mike Vrabel said it earlier this week. He said, we're still very much in this race. I've lost 5 games for this team. Our players have won 5. So if Tennessee is going to continue this stretch right here, it's going to start on Monday Night Football against Houston. You have to get the win there. But right now, the way that Houston's playing, even with a win over the Texans, I don't know if the division's realistically in sight the way that Houston's playing right now. You're going to have to face Indianapolis again. So there's a lot of questions for Tennessee moving forward. The good side is that you're like in a 5-way tie for that last wild card spot. But it starts with getting a win over Houston on Monday Night Football.
And currently, Baltimore is in that 6th spot, the second wild card spot. They're 5-5. 4 5-5 teams, or 5 5-5 teams in the AFC right now.
And you've lost to 4 of them. You've lost to Miami, Baltimore, Indianapolis, and I feel like I'm missing one.
Cincinnati's in that mix, but they haven't played
3 of them. They've lost to 3 of them head-to-head.
Yeah, nonetheless, Tennessee's got some work to do, but you do play Houston starting next week. You have another game against Jacksonville and another game against Indianapolis, so some big divisional games coming up. All right, before we call it quits, our playmakers of the weekend, I'm going to go with the Indianapolis offensive line. They have not allowed a sack to Andrew Luck in 5 weeks. Andrew Luck has thrown 3 more touchdowns in 7 straight games. So Andrew Luck, I think he's a slam dunk NFL comeback player of the year. He's benefiting from a Quentin Nelson addition in the draft, from a healthier offensive line to keep him healthy and seeing what he can do now post-surgery. So Andrew Luck and his offensive line, my playmakers of the week.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point there, because a couple years ago before he got injured, he was top 10 in every statistical category for a quarterback, wasn't throwing a ton of picks, was throwing a lot of yards, a lot of touchdowns, completing a high percentage of his passes. He was the 3rd most sacked quarterback in the NFL. Indianapolis didn't do a whole lot for Andrew Luck the first few years of his career. They're doing a lot for him now, and that offensive line's playing really well. We're going to go with Samson Ebukam from last night. 2 defensive touchdowns, was all over the field for the Los Angeles Rams. And in a game where you still have Aaron Donald making plays, it helps to have somebody else to clean up those plays. He was big for them. If you had him in fantasy, hats off to you, because it's not very often that a linebacker in that situation makes 2 defensive touchdowns. But yeah, that's big. And in a primetime game to come up like that, that's absolutely huge. You don't really get to see that very often. So a special night, a lot of special players in that game. It'd be interesting to see some future Hall of Fame lists, how many played in this game last night. Curious to see that a few years down the road.
Records falling all over the place. Final score, Monday Night Football, historic game. It was the Rams 54 and the Chiefs 51. With Joel Silverberg, I'm Eric Kane. Week 11 in the rearview mirror. Time to look ahead to Week 12, and we'll talk about it next Tuesday right here on Sports Radio, WNML.com on NFL in a Flash.